Okay. To go to grade 4 where they're playing 4 parts, so just in terms of stamina and everything else. But then after that year, if they've done well, to get bumped up in the Strathspey and Reel, I try to start them early on and say, let's anticipate next year you're going to be playing a Strathspey and Reel, and I get them going on 2-parters so that when we do extend it to 4-part tunes is what they're going to need in grade 3. It's tricky. It's like a quantum leap. So I think having the 2-parters is a really, really good idea. And of course, as teachers or players, you're looking at what tunes. And I've jotted a few notes down here that I think it's really critical when you're getting someone to go into that idiom for the first time, possibly, because maybe in their band they've just been playing march selection tunes and they haven't been playing Strathspeys. Or they may have been, and the band is also struggling with the Strathspey concept. But it's important to pick something that's melodic. And I say the same thing for people studying T-Brock for the first time, to go wading in with some of the tunes which are, someone doesn't have their microphone on mute. I'm hearing other clinks and clacks going on. Just make sure that you have your microphones on mute, please. Anyway, it's critical in P-Brock, I find, to make sure that it's a melodic tune, because that way you get someone hooked. And they say, oh, this P-Brock stuff's not that bad. It's actually quite nice. And just kind of nurture them along that way till you get into maybe some tunes that are a little more complex in terms of structure and in terms of the melody line and memorization. So it's the tune choice, and I think it needs to be melodic. Sometimes people will pick a tune and I listen to it and being delivered, and I go, even in grade 3 where they're playing a 4-parter, and a kid comes up to play and says, what are you playing for your Strathspey? And they say, Susan MacLeod. And I'm going, uh-oh, 3rd part, Derrido, danger, danger. And you just you just wait for it. And sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. I have to tell you, 9 times out of 10, you're going, oh, if you weren't playing that tune, you could do so much better. So there are lots of tunes that are a little more simplistic in terms of technical demand in the 4-parted, and the same thing in the 2-parted. But there's some tunes in the 2-parted category that have some demand in there that's tricky. And so picking tunes that are appropriate for these things. The other thing to watch in both the Strathspeys and the Reels, I find it more when as I was preparing for tonight, going through Strathspeys, especially in some of the old publications, and I'm going, why they put an F doubling there? That's just plain stupid, because it's a weak pulse. It's not a strong pulse. If that were the 3rd pulse or the 1st pulse, yes. And I'll give you an example of one where I would change the technique with the pupil. And sometimes people say, oh, is that going to get me in trouble with the judge? And say, no, trust me, it won't. Now, if you're playing Susan MacLeod and you change the Derrido to like a G grace note grip or something, that's it. No, you don't do that. Don't mess around with the Donald MacLeod composition. And some of these older traditional tunes, and they're in the older publications, sometimes the technique just doesn't make sense in terms of the music. So you change the technique around to fit the music. So that's something to take a look at, and we will tonight. We'll talk about in Strathspey's basic phrasing structure, and I want to give you some examples of how to go about it, and then we'll apply it to 2 or 3 tunes. One of the things that people ask is, okay, when I finish the Strathspey and I'm going into the reel, if the reel has pickup notes in the manuscript, do I play those? And my temptation is to say no, to go straight to the first on-beat accent at the start of the first part of the reel. And then if you repeat that phrase where you're playing the pickup notes, yes. And I'll give you a couple examples of where that would apply. And I would do that in solos. I would do that in bands, the same thing. wanted to mention that. The intro notes, yeah. Okay, and we'll talk about different concepts in the reel and the overall musical approach to the reel. One of the things I put in my own notes was, and I had that in the competition I was judging today. We're in a march event, grade 5, for example, the 2-part march, and they're playing the first 2 parts of a 4-parted tune. That's fine. You know, I would never, as an adjudicator, penalize that or hold that against the player. But I'm looking at all of these wonderful little 2-parted tunes and going, why not play a 2-parted tune? Because when, as a listener, you're ready for, you know, Arthur Bignell, and you're ready to go into the 3rd part, and but they finish after the 2nd part, so it's feeling half complete, if you wish. Whereas the traditional 2-parted tunes, you know, there's a sense of finish, of start and finish to it. That being said, there are many tunes that are 2-parted tunes, and then someone added 2 parts to it. Okay. 2, for example, Balmoral Highlanders, which we know is a 6-parted tune. Well, you'll find some old books with Balmoral Highlanders as a 4-parted tune. Well, I can dig out right here in my music collection an old book which has Balmoral Highlanders as a 2-parted tune as a quick step. So I think we've got to be careful not to pass judgment on, oh no, that's a 4-parter. Some of the older tunes were not necessarily 4. And I'm going to give you a couple examples tonight of tunes that Donald MacLeod added parts to, and reels in particular. And I think it's absolutely fine to play the first 2 parts, or play the tune as it traditionally was played before. Donald put his creative pen and to paper and added a couple of parts to it. So the little questions that you have to ask, and you know, best to work with your instructors on that, and to see what you think is what you think is appropriate there. So I know there's a lot written on, and you'll probably have seen it on score sheets and bands and solo sheets. Talk about the strong, weak, medium, weak concept, whatever that means. But what we're really saying is that in 1 bar, we're after a little more emphasis on the first pulse, the 4 pulses per bar, a little less in the second one, and then bring it back in the third, maybe not quite as much as the first pulse, and then a weaker pulse at the end. Some people take this to extremes, and the weak pulse becomes a non-pulse. So you've got Strathspey, no Strathspey, Strathspey, no Strathspey. You still need to accent it. So if you're playing a tune composed by Jim Wark, Molly Connell, bands love to play it, and it's a great tune for a 2-parted Strathspey event. Now, if I played that first bar, see, I'm jumping up that low A, and that's the second pulse. So I give a lot to the C and a fair amount to the E, but I still pulse the re, low A, high A. That's the 4th pulse. Now, if I go into bar 2 and I do the same thing, it's a bit boring. It grinds down. Now, it's a great tune and it kind of plays naturally. So what I'm telling people is, you want, in all of our music, you want a question and you want an answer. You need some contrast. So if you play it, bounce to the 3rd end. So the that E is the 3rd pulse. So it's almost like a strong, weak, medium, weak, 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 strong, and there's a 2-bar phrase. Son of a gun, you've got a question and answer. Question answer. Now, if you go, we took away at the start of 1, and we didn't give back to number 3. If you take, you have to give. That's the math in our music. Everything has to balance. Now, I love it. Sometimes when you're doing group sessions at a workshop weekend or something, you've got 35 people out there and you're talking about Strathspeys and you throw some music at them. I guarantee you, I'll always have someone who's back there looking at the music going, and up goes a hand. And I said, stop. I know what you're going to bring up. What I'm playing is not what's written. This is mathematics. It's not music. Toss it out. Okay, we need to play the right notes. We need to play the right embellishments. But the Strathspey doesn't come out in this manuscript, in any of the manuscripts. Okay, so we've got to get that. And that's an elevation that we as pipers have to produce, that a band has to produce, that the dancer has to produce. Same thing. So we're waiting in that C before we come down the low A. The dancer goes whoop, down. So then the next bar 3, we get the question again. Bar 4 is and really sit on that B to the last possible second. But you don't want to go, there's no pulse in there.
Rob Worrall playing. It's all there's.
And it balances. Question and answer. Now, if I'm the pipe major of a band and putting this across to my pipe corps for the first time, I'll tell you, I want 2 people. I want 2 people at the table with us. I want my lead drummer there. And I want my bass drummer there, because the bass drummer is going, okay, he wants some contrast here. Now, whether it's all coming out on the bass there, but you can also then start doing some really creative voicing with the tenor voices rather, to really emphasize what we're trying to do with our fingers, and in terms of the basic melodic or key structure of the tune. We go into the minor key in the final bar. Is it making sense? You know, we're so used to go da dum ba dee ba da da da, and you'll hear it with the soloist and go, oh, okay. Now, as you go from playing, now you have to go. That snap in the fingers. Oh, when you've gone from playing Terabas or some other 2-part at 2/4 march, this is where the demand is, and that's why it's great to put this little event in there. So maybe Molly Connell would be too demanding. Then you have to find another tune that works. I threw some other examples into my own package. One of the things to watch quite often, bar 2 in many of these tunes starts the same as bar 1, and you're almost musically seduced to play that note, that accent at the start of bar 2, the same as the start of bar 1. So I've just hauled out one called Aspen Bank, and it's an old tune. A lot of bands used to put that when we got medleys going back in the early 1970s. Bands would throw a tune like Aspen Bank in there. It goes. So you've got the D throw at the start of bar 2 and the start of bar 1, but the one at the start of bar 2 got to give less value to. bounce to the A. So you can't give that third pulse more. Okay, you need to give it as much as possible. The late Bob Hardy used to say, as I understand it, with his Muirhead's band, they played great Strathspeys. Just when you think you've given the third pulse enough, give it a little more. Give it a little more. Now, I mentioned sometimes you have to change the technique around a little bit. Bar 2 in the old publication, I think I took it at Scott's Guards, goes. So you've got two F doublings there. Now, the second pulse, that F doubling, that's a weak pulse. So no, why not? I would take both of those F doublings out because they're both on weak pulses. Because you want da da ba da, I don't, and stretch the high A. So there's a case where kind of just simplifying the technique a little bit. It's not necessarily making it easier technically to play. It makes it easier to bring the music out. The F doublings are like a roadblock to try and get the snap. So there's a spot where if you've got these doublings, big chunks of technique, of embellishments on weak pulses, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to change that for the sake of the music, not necessarily for the hands, because you get at players and say, oh, we can handle those F doublings, it's not an issue. But can you bring the most out of the music? Sometimes the fourth pulse musically takes you into or belongs to the next bar, the next phrase, the next part. So the last bar in that part, the first part of Aspen Bank, I'll just sing the last two bars. And then you have a strike, a run. Oh, that's a bridge to the next part. So I would play it. Now, because of the strike, it's very tempting to go, just jump right into it. And now you've lost your third pulse. But now, I'd be listening for that strike from a soloist and say, come on, get it in there. If you guys are all in my band, say, we've got some problems. There's some people having the big, clunky, stiff strikes, and then they can't get the snap in there. I'd say, okay, we're going to change that. We're going to go, we're just going to play a G grace note. And you would have half the band saying, thank you. But you'd probably have the whole band saying, that's easier to get the music out of it. So there's a case where originally when it got published, a strike got in there. It's an older tune. We've been used to hearing it for decades with the strike in there. But is it the technique that makes the most musical sense? So I would challenge that. So if a soloist played it with a G grace note, I'd actually be thinking to myself, 2 thumbs up. You've done a smart musical thing there. As long as they held the E before that G grace note, etc. So that's in that tune, Aspen Bank. Another one that I hauled out was called A.A. Cameron Strathspey. So so bar 2 starts the same as bar 1. That now I'm really stretching that D. Now, Shabadum, shabadum. So there's another thing in Strathspeys that you could set up a series of exercises and play them in Strathspey time. You know, my initial teacher had me playing doublings down and GDEs till the blood was dripping off my fingers. But they say, now do it as a Strathspey instead of, he says, come on now. Because you've got, and then not Strathspey. Now, I know in a lot of the publications, you'll see the three notes joined together, a little bracket over them, and they all have the same value. As an unwritten rule, that the vast majority of those are actually played with that extra cut on the first two notes because we're accenting to the third note. The tune I'm looking at, A. Cameron's Strathspey, has the, let me see that, the extra, whoops, the extra cut on the first two notes in the run at the end of the part. And that's actually the way it should be written if it's going to be musically written properly. So if we just go back to the idea of the GDEs and the doubling cuts, because that's the thing that catches a lot of people. They've been so used to their 2/4 marches on playing them at the ends of parts. Nice definition on the doubling. Now I'm saying, no, hold on. That was a bad one. All of those runs, and you can put together all sorts of exercises. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of pages and pages of exercises. It's not how I learned, but what I did learn is if there were a series of cut doublings in the tune I was working on, I would put those into an exercise. Why do a load of exercises or combinations that are not in the tune? Restrict yourself to the ones that are in the tune. Why do all those runs if you might only have 2 or 3 different ones in the tune? So that's something to think about. I was working with someone, it's a 4-parted tune, granted, but it's the same idea. It's a reel called Kildonan. So it goes the atam be and da, and you get people going, huh, nutty. So that little sequence can mess people up. And then the second part you get. So those are 2 different 4-note sequences in the first 2 parts. There are, I think in that tune, I counted them that night at the lesson, 4 different 4-note sequences. Now, the way they're written, it's dot, cut, cut, dot, but we're actually giving the number 2 note a little more, even though it's written the same, mathematically it's number 3. We use it as an and as a setup note. Da, 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 da. People skating over the rhythm. So that's a way of A, avoiding skating over the rhythm. So it's a win technically, and it sounds better. It's that lovely springboard into the last 2 notes. Anyway, if we could just even talk about the burrow with the G grace note and Strathspeys. So A. Cameron starts with, and a lot of the Strathspeys you'll look at, and you might avoid some because it's got a burrow with a G grace note. Oh, that's my Achilles heel. Avoid that one. Fair enough. But what's the problem? So a burrow is really doubling, 1, 2, put a G grace note, 1, 2, 3. Hear that 1, 2, 3? So whether I do a GDE or a G grace note burl. So you might find in the Strathspey, if it has G grace notes and burls, all you need, I like to call these rhythmic reference points, because I bet you'd be good on the GDEs, and then try to mimic the G grace note and the burl, try to mimic it or have it sound rhythmically the same as the GDE. So GDE, GDE, dot, dot, dot. It's a nice little trick, and it can really help you get over certain key problems. An aside doesn't deal with Strathspeys per se, but an adult learner I started to work with just a while ago doesn't want to compete, plays with a Legion band in Ontario somewhere, and he said, oh, I love going and listening to Pibroch. He says, but I've never played a note of my life which take me on as a pupil, as long as you agree that I'm never going to compete. I said, sure, no problem. So he's now working on his third tune over the last year. The first thing we had to work on was technique. And the first time we hit a Turluith, oh, it was grim. It was grim. It was, we've all heard them, you know, the kind of blap Turluiths. What is that? You know, Turluith translated means three. Ba-ba-bum. Ba-ba-bum. So I had him doing GDEs, do 2 or 3 GDEs, and then do the Turluith. I said, get it to sound rhythmically the same as the GDE. First one he did, nailed it. Threw his chanter down. He says, I've never been able to play good Turluiths. And now, so I said, keep going. Now the whole variation. And so it's been amazing using that strategy. So if you've got G grace notes and burls, which you'll get in a lot of Strathspeys, 2-parters, 4-parters, biggies, you know, A.A. Cameron starts. Not. So 2 things are happening there. 3 and dot, dot, dot. There's a low A into the burl with the G grace note. Haha. Look at that. The low A when you're on E is already there. It's all a function of what you do with the E finger. So the E down to the burl in bar 2, don't know if you're hearing that, I'm having to go down off that accent a little sooner than I did in bar 1, because it's the answer bar. Hey, there's our 2-bar phrase. Now, I've yet to read anything published anywhere that talks about Strathspeys being played in 2-bar phrases, but I'm absolutely committed to it. And when you listen, go back and listen to some recordings of some of the grade 1 bands, some of the recordings from the Glenfiddich, people playing at the top of their game, either as a soloist or a band, and you're going to hear this. And you're going to hear the bass sections bringing that concept to life. And you're going to hear snares in these chords with the dynamics that they can inject into the tune, bringing it to life too. So in other words, it just brings all that color. It brings all that color that we can only do with the length of notes. Okay, someone doesn't have themselves on mute. That we can only do by holding notes, but the snares and the bass can accentuate that. Now, if they're not, if they're doing something the opposite, Like we're talking about strong, weak, medium, weak, and then a weak, weak, strong. If we've got the snare line or the bass coming in with a lot of emphasis on the first pulse in bar 2, that's an ensemble contradiction. Okay, so we're not on the same page musically. And that's what we're after. We want to be on the same page musically. And now even that, so if you're listening to that and say, doesn't that sound familiar? So if any of you play for dancing, that roll into the burl, and it's the E finger defining the low A, and then dot, 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 1, 2, 3. So whether it's see, da da da, same rhythm, and it's a burl with a G grace note. So you can use some of those strategies to fix some of the technical problems you might be having in some of those tunes. Let's see what a couple of others I hauled out here. One of the tunes that really took off, and it took off when Field Marshal Montgomery played it in medley, and they did one of these foreshadowing bits of a bit of Strathspey. Everyone thought it was really quite unique and everything. It was clever. It was lovely. It's a beautiful medley. Actually, the 78 Frasers had done it years before in their Megantic Outlaw medley, which I thought was just so far ahead of its time. But anyway, when Field Marshal Montgomery did it with Shawnee's tune, the Fred Morrison Strathspey, I remember it was so they played the question, extra pulses, then the answer, and then ripped right into the thing with no extra pulses. You just kind of hoovered the audience into the tune. But if you listen to that tune, now, if you're really taken with it, it's, oh, we got to play this in our band, or we're going to play this in the 2-part at grade 4 event. I can handle all these D throws. I can handle that. And you go, and then you go, oh, you're playing bar 1 musically the same as, sorry, bar 2 rather, the same as bar 1. There's no answer to the question. They both start with the D throw. You know, if we put this into an orchestra, I would want not just that music coming out in terms of note values. I would probably orchestrate it that a different section was playing the answer, and it would even be quieter. So bagpipers can't do that. Snare drummers can. Bass and tenor can. They can give us that effect with the dynamics range that they can employ in a performance. What I'm saying here in terms of question and answer and strong, weak, medium, weak, and then almost a weak, weak, strong, is that a hard, fast rule? No. But I can tell you over 90% of the time, it will work. There might be times where the question has to go over 2 bars and then the answer ends up being 2 bars, but it's rare. Very, very rare. By the way, if you get a hold of Fred Morrison's book, and he rushed it, I know, to print, and I don't know if I can just focus this end of the part, end of the second line, you'll see a repeat sign, same in the second part. That's wrong. There's the full 8 bars is written out for each part. There's no repeat to it. Okay, and I've had people in the 2-part at Strathspey and Reel event play this tune. I love the tune. It's terrific. and they play the first part and then they play it again. Oops, they've gone by this. So it's a fairly significant typo. So that's why don't work on your own. Or if you have a pupil who's said, oh, I've been learning this tune, etc., let me hear it. Because these are the crazy things that can sneak in if they're playing it verbatim as it's been printed. And it's really kind of a cool Strathspey, and there are lots of little cuts that are easy to play. But you might not have that sequence in your kind of digital repertoire or rhythmic repertoire. But once you've played 2 or 3 and you establish some muscle memory with it, think, oh, this is easy. This is great. Now, Fred subsequently he keeps adding parts to the tune. So if you heard him perform with it, you'll say, oh, well, it's not a 2-part tune. Yes, it is. And he's just being creative and adding extra parts. So that's the tune, 2 parts of Shawnee's tune. It's a good one. It's a good one. Now, there are others that are maybe simpler. Loudon's Bonnie Woods and Braes. And that publication has in bar 2. Oh, there we are again. Weak pulse, F doubling on, how about there's E, that's our 3rd pulse. Or be careful you don't square it off there. Once you're up there, it's so tempting, just put the strike in there. So sometimes it's good just to go along and say, just maybe a highlighter and just go thump on the strong pulse, thump on the 3rd pulse, and then bump, bump, 3rd pulse in bar 2, and then 1, 3, 1, 2, thump 3. And visually, when you're learning, that just reinforces, you've got to stretch those pulses a little longer. It has a run at the end, but the run doesn't have the extra cut on the first 2 notes, but we would play it that way. Here's a little thing that they've done, though, that makes sense. There's our 3rd pulse, and the weak pulses. So why, if it's a weak pulse, would we go and play the big full closure D strike? So that's a spot I would say, you know what? If I'm working with you in a 1-on-1, it's written in this publication with a shallow strike. Makes sense. If it were written with the full closure, I'd say make it a shallow one there. Just trying to think. There was it was at, and I thought about this with a certain 4-parted tune, Inverary Castle, which goes then it goes. It has 2 D strikes at the end of the part. So for me, it makes sense the first D strikes on the 3rd pulse, and I'd make it full closure. And the 4th one, a shallow one. Pipe Sergeant of Inverary and District in a Strathspey and Reel event at Oban several years ago. He was playing that tune in front of 3 of us, and he did that. Heavy closure on the 3rd pulse and the weaker strike on the 4th. And I said to the other, he won the event, and the other 2 judges were really impressed with it musically. And one of the judges said, yeah, it was, the ends of those parts can really sound clunky sometimes. I said, yeah, especially if you're playing a full closure D strike on both of them. And kind of looked at him. I said, he was doing it on the 3rd pulse. That's the one you want the weight. The first and the fourth one, he just played the shallow string. A clever wee devil. He changed the technique from the manuscript to make it more musical. Now, that being said, I know this is a judging issue. We had, one of my pupils came along and he was mixing his D strikes depending on the effect that he's trying to create in a performance in a competition on our circuit. And the judge called him over and said, "Oh, you're playing two different types of D strikes. You've got to be consistent." I'm going, no. So anyway, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. I said, continue to do it. We just have to educate our judges a little more on that. Anyway, so that's just something to be, I toss out as a possibility. So if you see a D strike on a weak pulse, like the second pulse or the fourth pulse in any of these bars, I wouldn't personally play the full closure. Now, I tend to be a pretty heavy technician, and you get some people are very light fingered, and they could do that a full closure, and it doesn't have the same kind of right between your eyes kind of hit. They could get away with that and it'd be fine. So it depends on the individual. Another old traditional one, Lady Mackenzie of Fairburn. Humbity, habadum, careful there, you get that habadum, gotta wait. Humbity, habadum, oh, then it squares off. So it's very easy if you don't give to the third pulse in the first bar to lose it, and then you can't get it back. So you end up going humbity, habadum, humbity, ara, ara, clunk to clunk to clunk to clunk, and there's no Strathspey in there. Okay, and I know we got some other judges in the room with us tonight, and we've heard that. We hear it, and you go, "Oh, it's so easy to fix." Yeah, humbity, habadum, humbity, bada, adam, badobity, habadum, bada, rum, bada, badoo, bada, badobity, habadum, be, humbity, badoo, bada, etc. That's another tune, starts with a C double in bar one and also in bar two. So it's so easy to get caught up in humbity, habadum, humbity, and it grinds down. So what you're doing then is playing one bar little units, and you don't have that forward motion through the two bar phrase. No answer to the question. How are we doing? Doing great. Just trying to think. I thought tonight we could spend time on like one Strathspey, and no, I want to give you a cross section of different tunes and how you could apply the concept, from a contemporary tune like Molly Connell or Shawnee's tune that we hear out there a lot. Sandy Gordon is another one that Bruce Gandy wrote. You hear it a lot in pipe band competitions. And these tunes are really musical. It's easy to bring out the Strathspey idiom. Okay. Sorry, I used the word idiom. I'm waiting for some people to say, take a drink. He said the word. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. There are tunes. If I could just jump ahead. So let's say you do really well in your grade 4 Strathspey and Reel, and you're getting good musical comments, and what we're saying tonight is sinking and it's making sense. Now we move to 4-parted Strathspeys. There are some tunes that kind of flow naturally in terms of the question and answer. So if you took a tune like Maggie Cameron, where it goes, the question and answer just happens. You stretch the first and third, wait on the E, and then that F doubling is actually a bridge pulse to the next 2-bar phrase. If you're standing there performing just a Strathspey and reel, no march. And you go, oh, F. That's a Strathspey pulse, but it's weak. And so in that case, bar 1, the first E, and there are 8 pulses. If we count the lead in F, and we finish on the E, the third pulse in bar 2. And then we have and ended on the D in bar 4. And there's a lot of things in that tune. Lots of different things you can do. It's a traditional tune, so people will change the rhythm on it depending what they're trying to achieve. But you see, that's one of the reasons why Maggie Cameron is so easy to bring the concept out in. Demanding enough technically. There's a tune then that you may have heard, and you're playing your grade 4 events. Oh, maybe when I'm in grade 3, I'd like to play, let's see, You with the Crooked Horn. That's a good tune. It can be a deadly tune because bar 2 in each part sounds the same or starts the same as bar 1. So you've got a low A to a terlueth in bar 1 and in bar 2. So if you go grinds down, but I'm delaying that, the C doubling down. But if you and then it squares off. So if you lose that third pulse extension, you're in trouble. In your bands, percussion can define it and make it for you. In the old days when tenors were just flourishing and the bass had to do it all, but now the bass in coordination, the voicing with the tenors, who's going to give us that pulse, that last one? Is it the bass and one of the tenors? Is it just one of the tenors? Is it just the bass? Okay, get that sorted and make sure you wait to the last second before you pop it in. And away you go. So, and I've heard so many soloists and bands do a really nice job in this tune. Second, third. See, bar 2 starts the same as bar 1. So does the last part. How often do we hear? And away it goes, grinds down. So if you give too much to the high A at start of bar 2 and not give it to the third pulse there, you've lost the answer. Because what you want is etc. So first and third in bar 1, but still accent 2 and 4, and then pulse 2 the third in bar 2, and use that concept for bars 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. And go back and reinvestigate the Strathspeys you've been playing either on your own or within your band, and all of a sudden you're going to go, this makes a lot of sense now. And then listen to recordings and you'll hear it. You can almost sit there and tap, tap, and tap, and tap, 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 and tap, and tap, and tap, tap, tap. Not Da, da, ba, da, da, but see, if I don't stretch that high G, away it goes and it's square. And these cuts that we talked about, I should have actually used a word they love to use this one in Scotland. We're describing Strathspeys. They say you've got to give it the snap, the Strathspey snap. And I think one of the best things I ever saw, it was a T-shirt one time, and it said Strathspey on the front, and on the back it said, "It's a Scottish thing you just wouldn't understand." Anyway, so that's that. How about any questions that I'm seeing under the chat? A few here, comments.
If anybody see any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
I must apologize. I've done a stupid thing, because anytime I was playing, I should have had my original sound on like that. Is that better?
Yeah, you heard it pretty good though. You were coming through okay.
Okay. Yeah, it depends on people at the other end, the system they're using, whether it would come through okay. But I promise I've got it on now for the, God, I'm always squawking at pupils about that. You don't have your original sound on. It's stupid me, didn't have it on. That's classic. So that was one of the comments. And okay, I think that's basically. Any other key questions around the Strathspey? We've covered a lot of territory, and you just got to let it digest now and then go away and apply it to the tunes you're working on. Oh, sorry. Tempo. Start slow. Work it up. So you're out there playing in grade 4. What kind of tempo would be appropriate for a Strathspey, performance-wise? Let's just, if I went to my metronome and I went to so it's a careful tempo for that tune, for any two-parted Strathspeys, but that's 102. So I'd say anything lower than that, it gets very difficult to get the answer to the question. It's the same thing when we play our 2/4 marches. In grade 4, pupils of mine say, we've got to try and get that tune up to about 60 beats per minute. Below 60 beats per minute for a grade 4 march, you might get a comment and say, well, overall it's really well expressed, but it's sounding a bit draggy. And I might say below the 60 beats per minute, you're not really allowing the answer to contrast with the question. But if you're going up, I just don't hear the answer to the question. So it starts to blossom when the tempo comes up a little bit. So that's with most of the 2/4 marches that I would teach at a grade 4 level. And granted, they're not some of the biggies that I would be teaching maybe for someone in grade 1 or grade 2 or open professional. But 60 beats per minute, you can still get a lot of music, get a lot of music out of the tune. Let's see. How do you teach? There's another question here. How do you teach the feel of the question answer of a Strathspey? Or is that back of the T-shirt? It's all what you do with the pulsing. You know, if you get strong, weak, medium, weak, and then you have a weak, weak, strong, and that's going to contrast with bar 1 and you're going to hear the answer to the question. So anyway, I'd say 100, 102 as a lower number for your Strathspey. Obviously, when you go up through the grades, that's got to go up. It's got to go up. So then the next question we have to look at is our transition to the reel. I'm just looking at a couple of examples, but if you're playing Mollyconnell, for example, now you're going into a reel. You're on the on beat. Now, if you're playing a tune like G.S. McLennan's Dancing Feet, which goes, would I play the pickup C? I probably wouldn't. I would go right to the introductory, not a pickup note, but right to the introductory high A. One of the things, and we need to talk about the transition concept a little more. How often do we hear, oh, it's a really good Strathspey. This is really good in a solo performance, in a band performance, and a band's playing. I go, what happened to pulse 3 in bar 8? If you stretch the third pulse in bar 8, then the fourth pulse actually becomes a bridge to the reel. So, smooth as silk. I call those seamless transitions. That's a 2-drinker, okay? It's not on, it hasn't made the game yet, but it should be because I use it, okay? Anyway, so that third pulse in bar 8, and treat that almost like the end of the tune. Then you'll definitely stretch it. And you're not stretching it any more than you would if you were repeating Mollyconnell and playing it twice. No. But we have this built-in crazy thing in our heads. We get to that third pulse, we see the reel, and we go, and then we don't know how to enter the reel. So that's why I think a lot of bands go, here's what we'll do. And they put an extra beat in, or 2 extra beats. But if you go, finish it on the third pulse, and then watch the bass drummer. And away you go. Dancing Feet has a lot of repeated sequences. It's on the same page as another great G.S. McLennan tune in his book. It was the book that was produced way back by Hardy's. I have one of the original copies of it. It was interesting. I like to teach this tune as a first reel. You know, I used the old green tutor book, but the reel that's in there is the first one. I go, nah, I think we get it more fun than that. So I'll teach Dancing Feet. A pupil of mine who rose to a very good level, grade 1, was playing with the 78 Frasers. His father's a very good piper. I'm not mentioning names on our judging circuit. And this young man, married now with 3 children, lives in the Chicago area, works down there. Anyway, I started him from scratch, and Dad would bring him the lesson. Dad would hang out in the living room. I was working in the kitchen. I said, okay, time for your first reel. So I worked on dancing feet and said, we'll do some sight reading. So I did some singing on it. He was a good sight reader. He was sight reading through it. I said, okay, here are the strategies, and here's what we're after. Like dee ba dee da dee dum, not da dee dum, it's da dee dum, ba dee da dee da dee dum, ba dee da 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 dee dum, da dee dum, ba da dee ba dee. So we worked on that. So okay, next week we'll hear some of your marches, other stuff. He wasn't onto the pipes yet. And then we'll hear your new reel, see where it's at. Came back the next week, working on different tunes. And you know what the youngsters are like. When you say, let's hear the reel, and you see the look. And the look says, oops, haven't worked on it. So I just played dumb. I said, don't worry, but I didn't ask you to have it memorized. You can still sight read with it. Keep the music in front of you. So he looked at it. Remember I said he's a good sight reader. And you remember I said there are two tunes on the same page. So he looked at it and he started to play. And sure enough, he's playing the little cascade. And it wasn't until he reached the third part. And his dad had come around the corner in the kitchen. He's going, and I went, don't say a word. And the kid stopped me and went, that's not my tune, is it? I went, no. Yours is only a two-parter. That's six-parter. You're into the fourth part. And I said, but you know what? Let's use this tune as an exercise every week. I didn't tell him it was one of the most demanding reels ever written. And we just kept sight reading and did it as an exercise every week. He ended up going on in grade 1 and competing with this tune because I didn't throw up a barrier to him with the tune, but it was really a great tune in terms of controlling rhythm. And it was a good lesson for me too, because quite often, we grew up saying, oh, I heard a certain tune. Oh, I'd love to learn that tune. And the teacher said, oh, someday, son, you're not ready for that yet. I'm going, well, other professional musicians learn really demanding pieces at a slow tempo and then bring it up. Maybe years down the road, if it's a really, really demanding piece. But it was a real valuable lesson for me. But back to Dancing Feet. Great tune. Be ba dee da dee dum ba dee da dee da dee dum. Okay. 2-bar phrase. If we play it, so that there's the end of the phrase. So we're giving a little pulse, 1 and 2 and on, off, end. 1 and 2 and on, off, and. Now, see, you need to have those accents, 1 and 2. Be da da e, dee da da e, dee a dee da da o, not da 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 do. Then you have no shape to it. Okay, so we need some shape to these easy tunes, and it's easy to run away with it. Now, I did jot down a possible tempo for some of these reels. Bum buddy daddy dum buddy daddy daddy buddy daddy daddy dum buddy dum buddy dum buddy daddy daddy dum. So we're up to about 75 to 78 there for that reel. Whether it's so that's pushed a little bit at 78. If we took it for a grade 4, 75. That makes sense. But once again, easier tunes, you can take it up a little bit. One with a little more technical demand, just nudge it down a little bit. So we're in the mid 70s thereabouts. But if you go down to you might as well be a march. So reels, we're talking about an accent, wait. So the wait. So the accent at start of bar 2 is not being given the extra. It's more of a on-off wait, on-off finish. So the second on-beat accent is the end of the phrase. So the on-beat in bar 1, the second on-beat in bar 1, just accent on-off at the start of bar 2, but then finish the phrase in the second accent. If you were in a pipe band, in a grade 1 band playing those are the biggies. It applies. All of them. That's on and on off accent to finish the phrase. In a pipe band, as an ensemble adjudicator, I'm listening for what percussion and the pipe corps are doing at the ends of these phrases. And when they all define the same way, I'm going, ha. That's magic when that happens. Absolute magic. And as I said, with the Strathspey concept, percussion can do with the dynamics range, volume-wise, what we can only do with our fingers. So I was treating Dancing Feet a little more dot cut. I mentioned that sometimes there's a 4-parted tune that actually started as a 2-parted tune, and then clever Donald McLeod added 2 parts. So right now I'm looking at the Blackberry Bush. It's in Donald McLeod's collection. Parts 1 and 2, traditional. Parts 3 and 4 by Donald McLeod. So when if I have a player going into a Strathspey and Reel event, that's a 2-parter. Now we don't have that on ours yet, but you may have some impact on the association here, and they may make that change, because I think it's a great idea. The Blackberry Bush is a great example of one for maybe a player that's a little stronger technically. It starts with an F doubling. It actually has pickup notes. So there's a lot of work there. You've got that. So there are those dot, cut sequences. And that's the tough stuff. That's the real tough stuff. Because you get people going, and they'll say, oh, my talcum really stinks. I said, no, the talcum didn't stink, but the B before it did. It was non-existent. So, and the B is defined for the most part with the D finger and the C finger, ha and talcum. So treat it as an and note. See, that's the end of the 2-bar phrase. You got to accent that B before going to the double OA. As a teacher, I would simply be going at the lesson. Da, 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 da. da 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 ba da dum da 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 ba da dum to reinforce that. But because of the at the start, I would be I wouldn't play the pickup notes on that one. I go right to the onbeat accent, the F doubling. The other thing I've mentioned in my own notes here in reels, it's really important to let the short notes breathe. In the second part of this tune, for example, it goes, you don't want, so that's just like an embellished high A. You need a high A before you strike. D's, lifting them. Versus, it's all tight. You don't want that tightness. You want the short notes to breathe. Visually, I try to tell people, I want you to envision a sideways figure eight. Hey ba ta antatam batanda ata atam batridi pata antatam batandi patrodam batidi patra antatam batande ata atam. That not, you don't want to overclip that low A. See that D before the talk down? That's what you hear so often. So treatment of these short notes, letting them breathe, and getting lots of offbeat. Hey, ba, not de, da, ha, ba, da, dum. But if you ha and da dum, you're onto the offbeat early. Ba, and da dum, ba, da, da. So tempting to go. Getting that lift and letting short notes breathe. So the Blackberry Bush, demanding enough tune, but a great example. Simple tune, Piper drumming. So 1 and 2 and oh. See, even those, see if I jam that, it just loses the flavor. Maybe try to visualize that train. You're trying to shum, 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 but it doesn't get any faster than that. Now, one of the tunes that sometimes bands and soloists like to play, some of these rounder reels, and that is a question I think you have to confront. Some of the older traditional more dot and cut reels, and then some that are rounder. I've got a tune I'm looking at written by Hamish Moore, Maltz on the Optics. It's very round. That So you can still get that, but controlling the rhythm. They're very, very tough to play. Very tough. And to get the subtlety to it. So when I'm working with someone wanting to, even for a little medley contest, some of these knockout contests that we have up here, the final round is a little mini medley. And you get players wanting to play some of these rounder reels. And I said, okay, now we've got to make sure that you're controlling the rhythm, because it gets very, very difficult when you don't have those little tiny dots on that. Versus if you're getting into the wind that shakes the barley. That's easy. Well, it's not necessarily easy to play, but it's easier to find where the beat is, and easier to get that. And then you lose the control of it and it speeds up. Hear the question and answer that. It's a great little tune, The Wind That Shakes the Barley. All those B's to finding the end of the phrases. B again. All B's. I'm just looking at the first part. Yep. Every accent that defines the end of a 2-bar phrase is a B. And that makes it easy. So when you're performing, you know, and the anxiety kicks in, go, oh, I speed up sometimes. I go, okay, think B. 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 So you keep focusing on those B's every second bar, and all of a sudden, you go, I'm done. And I didn't freak out. So you took a thing that was very simple to focus upon, and that also controlled potential performance anxiety, and you had great music. And you stayed on the tune. It doesn't have pickup notes. It'd be really easy. Lovely smooth transition. See, all these lovely smooth as silk dot cut reels. The kilt is my delight. Sorry. That one has a. I wouldn't go. Not too much E. Just roll into the grip and fatten that grip up. See, a grip is a doubling on low G. And I want to hear the rhythm there. And the roll you get out of that. So there's a case where some of these embellishments, like I talked about, how you fatten them up and pull the rhythm out of the embellishment or the grip in a reel. It's not just technique, it's music. There's music in these embellishments, in the rhythm in the embellishment. I know in the sheets I was writing up for players today in the different grade levels in their marches, 2/4 marches, 6/8 marches, etc. I just kept saying you need to pull out a little more rhythm out of your turluths, because I was hearing hum, bop, hum, da-ba-dum, hum, da-ba-dum, hum, da-ba-dum. Got to fatten up the rhythm. And then someone else comes along and it's beautiful, and it's so much better musically. There's another 4-parter that Donald McLeod added parts to. Actually, it was a 1-parter. And he wrote, I think he called it Roddy McDonald's Fancy or something. Originally, it was a tune simply called Cronin's Reel. Very easy to maybe just play the 2 parts to that one. That would be really quite good. It's kind of, Angus MacDonald republished it and just said traditional first part, and then Donald McLeod the next 3 parts, but he put the original title on it. But he's written a lot of stuff even, like and I go, no, I don't think so. So we would put dots and cuts on that. Anyway, that's another tune that would be, for someone who's a little stronger technically, be a good two-parted reel for that person, like the Blackberry Bush. Someone who's just struggling a little bit with the technique, I would say, okay, let's just be a little more realistic with what your hands can do at this point in time. Let's see. It's another tune you don't hear as often, the McFarlane's Reel. De adradi 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 dambade adradi adrapatambade ambade adradi adradi adradi. Once again, you're going to have to get that. So you get that da 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 da, not da da patro. Then bar 2 would be the same as bar 1, but da 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 da. Be a great tune. Great tune in the pipe band. That tune. Slip some lovely harmonies in that second part. We know that the keel row is a great old traditional Strathspey. Donald McLeod arranged it also as a reel. It would be a good, he wrote 4 parts for it, but if you took the first 2 parts of the keel row for a 2-part Strathspey and reel event, it'd be really quite good. It's a close the door. Get that accent at the end of the phrase. You see the structure of it? Hear the question and the answer. Question and answer. 2-bar phrases. I had loads of others that I ran off here, but I don't think we have to go through a lot of these. Some of them, they're more dot cut, but maybe just a little rounder, and you can play them a little faster. I've got the tune here. This is a great tune, the Barn Dance. Hot and button, dot on heat and dot. Hot and dot on beat and date and date, aha, hot and button, dot on beat and date and dot and doba dum, hot and button, dot on hot and date and dra, dot on hot and dot on date and dra. So some of these answer phrases, or answer bars rather, in the 2-bar phrase are just a little rounder. Hot and button, dot on beat and date and date and da, dot and dat and dra, hot and date and dra. Now the book I took it out of has it all dot cut, but I would hot and button, dot on beat, date and date and da. Then you get the question and answer. Then you hot and button, dot on button, dot and date and dra. Very subtle. Tougher to get the effect there than in some of these others that I was using to demonstrate with, but would be really quite good. There's a pickup E, I wouldn't play it from a Strathspey. I go straight to that double low A, but you don't want chum. Remember, short notes have to breathe, so you want. Coming down, defining the low A, short note, and then the doubling. That the roll that you're trying to create there. That's a really, really good tune. So we've talked tempo, we talked about short note treatment, we talked about offbeat, how that the treatment of offbeats in reels absolutely critical, and we talked about how to get subtle definition, question and answer, and 2-bar phrases even in our reels, whether they're 2-parters, 4, or 6. We talked about the transition, how to accommodate that, and talked about a few examples. Loads of contemporary ones out there. A lot of the contemporary ones are rounder, and they were written more for pipe band performance, if you wish, and not necessarily the kinds of tunes that would be, I don't think, at least, that's just a personal preference, best to showcase your musical abilities in a 2-part Strathspey and reel event. So my strong advice to be go more for a traditional dot cut approach in your 2-part reels, whether you're playing them or teaching them for an event like this. Questions?
You have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question.
I have a question. So when you transition, you actually start out like the reel is slightly bit slower before you get into the tempo. Is that correct?
Well done, Tammy. Yes. Which you can do as a soloist. Yeah, I would do this, always did the same in a 2/4 march. In a pipe band, if you tried that, the gang at the back would be going, have you totally lost it up there? So, but wouldn't it be great if a pipe band could go shut them button dottum button dottum 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 button dottum. Now we're starting to hear some of that in some of the higher grade 1 pipe bands. So they're just taking it to that next level. Yeah, and even gosh, I spent 15 summers teaching at the Gaelic College in Cape Breton, and so I'm used to that kind of traditional Strathspey approach, and then the pulses become more faster, equalizing the pulses and all into the reels. How did that happen? How do they get us there? So that's another thing. I've heard a couple of bands have a go at that, and it's tough to do. But no, that little, even if you're going into a big reel like dee da dum da dee ba dee da dee da dum ba da ba dum ba dee 3 ba dum. I try to hit my tempo in the second bar. In fact, I was playing there yesterday and I played a selection of little two-parted reels, and the one I started with was so I started with but bar 2, that's when I hit my tempo. And from my standpoint, if I hear a soloist do that, whether it's in a big 4 or 6 part tune that they're playing, or a 2-part tune, and I go, oh, that's clever. That's really sophisticated. And they would get that sophisticated transition into your reel. Anything else? Or your head's busting right now. You're saying, I want to go and re-examine all the reels I'm playing. Haul out the books.
Well, hearing no other questions, Bob, can't thank you enough for doing this. I think everybody on this call certainly learned an awful lot tonight. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to do this. On that chair in the background, that gold chair with the tacky upholstery, it was my mother's chair. It's loaded right now with things. They're all presents when I'm hoping on Friday to get down to see our good friend Ken Eller, who's back out of the hospital and home again. And all of those from, he retired from the RSPBA judging panel. So when I was over for Celtic Connections, they have some presents they sent back. Working with the kids in Winnipeg last weekend, presents for him. Who else? I have presents from other people for him. Oh yes, there are also some presents for his wife too, because she, you know, the Admiral puts up with a lot, so there are a couple things there for her. But anyway, I know lots of you are really good friends of Ken, and I'll pass on your best wishes. And
I would just say to add on to that, Bob, if you can all keep Ken in your thoughts and prayers for sure, just I'm sure he would really appreciate that, as Bob and I would as well.
Yeah, he's a stubborn, strong-minded old bugger, and I'm sure he's going to come through this.
I'll be speaking with him tomorrow.
Excellent. You can tell him I said he was a strong-minded old bugger. You might want to leave the old bit out, you know?
That's the part that's most right.
But just make sure you reinforce with him that on my flight this past weekend, I did get bumped up. Okay.
I'll let you tell him that.
I already have. And he quickly responded with, oh, they must have got my email.
See, he's still there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thanks again, Bob, and thank you all for coming on the call tonight. And tell your friends about the one coming up on March 25th. And we're going to try and have another one in April as well. We've got that one in the works already. And that one will be based more on total pipe band dealings, hopefully. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this together, Jim.
Bye.
Thank you, Jim.
Have a joyful week.